Okay, we are starting 4.2, and we are going to start that with two sentences that aren't even in the exercises. A lot of times, students get very confused about when they use and when they use comma and. And that is true for any of the what they call fanboy words. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. But the trick is, if you understand sentence structure, you should never be confused between these two things. And is telling you that somewhere you have a branch. You have one subject, Peleus, you've got two verbs, defeated and forgotten. And so you really have one sentence that divides out. But if you have a comma and you have comma and, what that is telling you is you have two completely separate sentences, and those two sentences are essentially being joined together in the middle. And so when you can't tell where a comma goes, and a teacher sees that you're putting commas in places that shouldn't be, or you're missing commas in places that need it, what the teacher automatically knows is you do not understand basic sentence structure, because you can't recognize when you have one sentence that branches off versus when you have two completely separate sentences. So the rule you have to remember is very simple. If you have one sentence that branches off somewhere, doesn't even matter where it branches off, but if you have one sentence that branches off somewhere, you are going to have just the simple conjunction. Okay? If what you have are two sentences, so you have a complete main idea with subject and verb, another complete main idea with subject and verb, and those two are joined together, then you're going to have a comma in front of your conjunction. So that comma is there to tell you that you have a much different structure to look out for than the simple forked. So let's do a little bit of practicing. If you notice in 4.2, these all have commas, which means every single time we have the two sentence setup. Let's do some of these. Okay, the first one, Peleus was defeated by Atalanta in wrestling, and she has been largely forgotten. The very fact that I have yet, a comma before the yet, means that I have two completely separate sentences, each with its own subject and its own verb. So let's look in front of the yet. I have, Peleus is my subject. What is it that she's doing? Well, she's getting defeated. Do you have any words that put it into past tense? Why, yes, I do. Thank you for asking. Was. Do you have anything that describes Peleus, like brave or beautiful or dead? Nope. So, no, nothing is dangling under Peleus. Do you have anything that describes her defeat? Yep, by Atalanta describes defeat. By Atalanta. Do you have anything else that describes defeat? Yep, in wrestling. They were both well-known wrestlers. Okay, now, you then run into this yet. You do not need to put the comma with your yet. The very fact that you have two separate main idea lines means, of course, you have to have a comma. So it's a different structure. What is the subject in the second half? Well, we have she. What has she been doing? Well, she's been getting forgotten. Do you have any words that move forgotten into the past? Why, yes. Separate your subject and your verb. Is there anything that describes how she has been forgotten? Largely. So what you are looking at is two completely separate sentences, and those two sentences are joined together with a conjunction. So if you see the comma in front of your conjunction, always look to have this structure with two separate sentences. Now, if you cover up one side, you will see that each of these two sentences, both the top and the bottom, are actually pretty easy to diagram by themselves. The only trick is making sure that you join them together. So now we have the huge Caledonian board charged and Atalanta struck with her spear. The very fact that you have not and, but comma and tells you for you to have a comma in front of the conjunction, you have two separate sentences. So in the top, what do you have? You could put just bore on the top and describe Caledonian and say that's a descriptive word. But if you read a lot of mythology, you know that's kind of that's what it's called. Its name was the Caledonian boar. One of the most dangerous animals in the ancient world, and yeah, she was part of killing it. What did the boar do? It charged. And now we just have to put the danglies in. What word is used to join these two sentences? Well, that's and, so let me put it there. Do I need to put my comma on my conjunction line? No. The very fact that these are two separate main ideas is what already tells the reader that that had to have had a comma with it. Okay, in the second sentence, struck is my verb. Is there any word that puts it into past tense or future tense? Nope, no helping verbs. Who is it that struck? Well, that would be Atalanta. And that leaves me with her spear. Okay, is that describing she's with her spear Atalanta, or is it with her spear that she struck? Well, clearly it's the latter. So, with spear, erasing the messiness, her. And there you go. So neither side is particularly difficult by itself. You just have to make sure that you remember to join those two together because they are joined into one. It's called a compound sentence. We talked about compound subjects and verbs where it takes two words to make up one idea. So throw is different than throw up. Throw up is a compound verb. Well, a compound sentence is when it takes two or more sentences to make up one sentence. And that compound sentence that uses a fanboy, technically it's called a coordinating conjunction, the comma in front of the conjunction is what tells you that you have a compound and you're going to have two separate sentence diagrams joined together. Okay, the minute I see comma and joining the two halves of this sentence, I'm immediately going to put in two separate main idea lines. Before the word and I can go ahead and I can just put and in here to remind myself that that comma and is what separates the two halves. In the first half, the verb is thrown. Do I have anything that puts it into the past? Yep, were. Great. What is it that's getting thrown? Well, that would be apples. And then I just have to put in the modifiers. So, golden apples were thrown by Hippomenes. You see, Atalanta refused to get married to any man, and so her way of making sure she didn't have to get married was she said that she would only marry a man who could outrun her. But she was the fastest human being on earth, so no man could outrun her. And she set the challenge that said that if a man raced her and lost, he forfeited his life. So he died. She got a lot of men killed until finally Hippomenes went to Aphrodite and is like, dude, you got to help me out here. I'm never going to get the girl. So Aphrodite gave him a bunch of golden apples that were guaranteed to catch Atalanta's eye. So basically Hippomenes is like, I can't get the girl, so I shall cheat. But that's a pretty simple, straightforward sentence diagram. Then all I have to do is I look at the words that come after that and I diagram that as my separate sentence. They were gathered. Who gathered them? Atalanta. They were gathered by Atalanta. So each of these two sides is actually pretty simple. The only trick is joining them together. Okay, let's go on to our next one. Okay, the second I see that I have got the comma yet in the middle, I know that I have two separate sentences joined with a yet. So let me just diagram my two separate sentences. What's the action before the word yet? Well, that would be born. Do I have anything that moves us into past or future? Yep, was. Who was it that was born? Yeah, I'm not even going to pretend that I can say his name. The P-boy. Yeah, no clue. But we do have a description of how he was born. He was born to Atalanta. So that was her son. So all of those words come before yet. Now, what are the words that come after yet? She couldn't stay with him. And there's a little bit of a trick here. So what is the action? Stay. Do I have anything that moves us on the timeline? Yes, I do. I have something that makes it sort of less likely because I'm saying it could happen. So could, should, would, these are all words that are helping verbs and they have to go on top of the line. And you're like, but wait a minute. I don't have could, I have couldn't. Well, couldn't is a contraction for could not. Those are two separate words. Could is a helping verb. Not is not. It's just describing what kind of could. It's like playing opposite day. So if it is describing could, any words that are descriptors, where do they get diagrammed? Well, they get diagrammed underneath. Except I don't actually have the word not. What do I actually have? Nt. Feel like you're doing some club music there? So, who is it that could stay? Well, she. What kind of could stay could she do? The not kind. And then, of course, we have another word that describes the staying, and that's with him. Not a word, a phrase. So the only thing that was tricky there was recognizing that not is describing what kind of could we have going on. It's a separate word. It's not part of the actual verb. Okay, one more. Again, the second I see comma or, that comma or tells me that what I'm looking at is two completely separate sentences. If I saw just the word or, I would be like, oh, hey, we have a branch. But I don't have just the word or. I have comma or. And that means two separate sentences that are joined together by that conjunction. So, in the first half of the sentence, I'm going to look at the words before the or. Wow, that's a lot of words, but I see that I have a pretty simple subject, and that is students. What are students doing? They are learning. Do I have any words that put it into past? Yes. Have been learning. Do I have any helping verbs that tie it more firmly to the timeline or suggest that this action of learning might not be that attached to the timeline? Words like might or I don't know. When you are asked a question, where does one of your helping verbs often land? The beginning of the sentence. Should. So, students, subject side, should have been learning. Does that sound like a complete idea? Yeah, that is my main idea. About her. Is that about her student, or is that the learning about her should have happened? Yeah, it's learning. Okay, so let's look at the second half. Again, we have students. We have learn. Do we have any helping verbs? Yes. Should. Separate my subject side from my verb side. About modern subjects. About. Noun, subjects. Modern. Okay, there's nothing there that you don't know how to do. You know to look up front to find helping verbs. You know to look for things that impact the timeline to attach to your main verb. You know how to do prepositional phrases. So the only new thing that you really ran into is if you have a comma in front of a conjunction, make sure you have two complete sentences. So let's take a run through a couple of ideas from 4.3, and then I'm going to turn you loose to do 4.3 on your own. I know, the horror. You'll survive. So on number 1, you see that you have a comma, but. The minute you see a comma, you know two complete separate sentences that are joined together. On number 2, you see an and that and is coming between two verbs. So you have one subject, Odysseus, two verbs. No comma means you have a branch, and that's where your and goes. On number 3, you see you have an and. Again, there's no comma in front of it. So that tells you you have a branch, and it's joining two subjects, Hera and Zeus. So you've got two subjects that are doing one action. Makes sense? But if I skip ahead to number 8, on number 8, you will see that you have a comma, so. The minute you have a comma, you know you have two completely separate main idea lines that are going to be joined together up front. So when you are looking at these, what you really have to ask yourself first, because 4.3 asks you to be able to recognize which one is which. When it asks you which one is which, what you really have to look at is the punctuation. If you have a comma up front, expect two separate lines. That's what a comma up front means. If you have no comma, expect there to be a branch somewhere. That's what 4.3 is testing you on. It's testing you on whether you understand the difference between two fundamentally different types of diagram. So the first thing you should look for is that comma. If the comma is there, you have separate sentences. If there's no comma, you have one sentence that's going to break apart and branch apart in some place. And That's why teachers get so aggravated when you're not placing your commas correctly. Make sure that you are showing me that you understand the difference between two separate items and one item that breaks, because those are different diagrams. So I'm going to turn you guys loose to do 4.3. Good luck. Rock it out. Talk to you later.